Hello, everyone, and welcome. I don't know where you're listening in from, whether you're in Australia, in the States, around the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am super excited for you guys to join me for another live Guide and Grow event. But before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which I am from, the Darug people. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and future, for they hold the memories, the traditions, and the culture of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here in Australia. Before I introduce our amazing guest today, I would like to welcome everyone. Let us know where you're listening in from. Feel free to comment at any time during this live segment. Today, we are going to talk about connection from birth and beyond. We all know how important connection is between us and our children. And I would love to introduce an amazing guest we have today. And before we do that, if you are streaming across our Facebook group, our Facebook page, our LinkedIn or YouTube channel, all these events are totally free for all our members to come to. So I'm so excited for you guys to join us today. I would love to welcome, I'm just going to bring out our special guest today, Dr. Eric Dustman, and I'm just going to take him off mute there so he can say hello.
Hi, Sylvia. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. It's a joy to be here.
That's okay. I'm going to read a quick bio on you. So you're a parent to 3 children. You hold a master's in education, PhD in educational studies with an emphasis on empathy, an author, head of school for the Montessori School of Maui. And Dr. Dustman has been fortunate to live and work in Ohio, China, and now in Maui, Hawaii. So welcome.
Thank you.
So tell everyone that's listening out there, how did you even get into Montessori? Give everyone a little bit of background as to, why you chose this path or why it actually chose you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I think it chose me. When I began my university studies, I began studying architecture,
Wow.
actually, and have dabbled in that still, because I think it too, in terms of creating spaces, much like Montessori prepared environments, really stands to provide an opportunity for us to support our children in their growth and development socially, morally, emotionally, whatnot, based on the spaces that we create. So I've done a couple things over my career, but what really led me to Montessori education was a former girlfriend's mother. I dated a girl in college whose mother was an assistant in the first public Montessori elementary school in the United States, in Cincinnati, Ohio. And when I graduated from the university, I graduated with a degree in personnel, industrial relations, so not even architecture ultimately. But I loved the idea of group dynamics and personal development. And so I think, through that entire process, I decided that I would become an assistant myself. And so I was an assistant in a non-Montessori school, and worked primarily with children kindergarten to grade 4, many, many years ago. And from then I just thought, well, maybe I should look at administration. And so, of course, I was a Montessori teacher for a period of time, in a lower elementary as well as an upper elementary classroom. Then I moved into administration, and have been very, very fortunate to teach others in other parts of the world, as well as lead really a lot of good people that make me better every single day. So.
That's incredible. I absolutely love hearing about how people came to Montessori, or like what, the story was, because I think that whenever I talk to different Montessorians around the world and I hear their story, I'm like, this could be put into a book, because everyone has these stories about how they came to Montessori and, and what led them to it. And like you said, for me, it chose me. And so I love that story. That's awesome. We got people here from Boston, from Manila. So let's keep the countries coming in. I love seeing our global platform. So today we're going to talk about child connection. So let's dive into the fundamentals. So what really can we discern about the parent-child connection and its impact on our current and future relationship with them?
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this. In all of my work, and the conversations that I have with our parents here at school, and anytime I have an opportunity to speak with a group or go to a conference or whatever, I like to speak about connection. So I think it's absolutely paramount for healthy child development. I think it should be based on three things. It should be based on respect, age appropriateness, and the establishment of limits. When I talk about respect, I talk about providing space for children to do for themselves whatever it is they're capable of, and in ways that may stretch them. When I talk about age appropriateness, I talk about recognizing a child for who he or she is and where they are developmentally. And when I talk about limits, I mean offering redirection in respectful ways and when appropriate. Um, I've thought a lot about, of course, this over my time, but in preparation for today. And I think that I would like to suggest that parenting is a matter of avoiding the extremes. And when I say that, I think two things. I think one, we can treat children as though they're babies, regardless of their age, or we can treat children as adults, regardless of their age. And I think that, if we treat children as babies, we're belittling them and we're not providing them with the respect or the opportunity to do for themselves if in many cases they're capable. And the flip side of that, if we treat them as adults, then we're not providing them with limits that they're ready to manage. So I think this can, if we stay in the middle, then obviously veering one way or another, depending on situations, I think that we can, eliminate our hindrance of them, and in the relationships that we share, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really valid point. And I love the fact that you're talking about the respect to the child, the limits, and finding that boundary, because a lot of the time people have this misconception about Montessori being like, just limitless and the child can do whatever they want and they have the freedom and all that sort of stuff. So I think, to really have that freedom within limits and having that boundary is super important, especially in the establishment of connection. So I think that's fabulous. And anyone that's listening out there, if you have a question for either myself or Eric as we're going through, please feel free to comment. We'll pop them up on the screen. If you have any questions, this is an open discussion. And I feel like the more that Eric shares with us, the more that we can really reflect on our practice and what we're doing. So what would you say, Eric, was an obstacle when, presented when parents or caregivers are trying to build this connection, especially when, society is experiencing this shift of expectations, the evolving family structures, the lack of support systems. Like, it's a completely different world that we live in today compared to how we were raised or generations before us. So obviously connection is becoming a lot harder. What are some of those obstacles that you have seen emerge?
Well, a couple things. I mean, I think that a lack of time taking has really created a huge obstacle for us in making and building connections and relationships between parents and children. As you said, things have shifted. There are new expectations for adults that are in the workplace and whatnot. And then if you add an additional caregiver, a nanny or whatnot, that exponentially brings more challenge because of the different values people share, the different values people hold, and the limits that they create. And so I would suggest that, one thing that we could do to limit these obstacles is to ensure that we are engaging in time to wholeheartedly and honestly be present to grow and learn from one another. So I think that there's a couple other things that I've thought about. I think that in that time taking, there's a couple things that parents may, or certainly what I've observed, may resort to. They might resort to being overtly anxious for their children and what they're experiencing, or they may be fearful of exhibiting their own vulnerability. And when I talk about those things, I think about the anxiety of parents maybe too anxious about the things their children are going to do that perhaps they themselves experience themselves. So, we all hear in education, helicopter parents or snowplow parents or whatnot. Like, we can talk about resilience. That's perhaps another show. We can talk about grit. We can talk about challenge. We can talk about failure and the ability to learn in those instances. And so what I'm suggesting is that parents that are fearful of those types of things for their children, if they're overly fearful and they don't allow for those things to occur, then it inhibits the ability to form connections when challenges do arise. If parents are concerned about being vulnerable and not showing their children that, hey, I too have had that experience, and leaning into those moments where children are uncomfortable, then that stands to create issues too, based on ultimately what I've experienced myself as a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those experiences, like you were saying, to actually allow children to learn through mistakes and not letting our anxiety and our kind of vulnerability cover being opportunities for experiences with the children. So I think it's important to have that reflection on yourself and where is that coming from. So those obstacles that you put in, are they coming from within you, from your own anxieties, and then that's kind of like put up forward onto the child. So yeah, it is really about understanding where you're at. And yeah, I love that. So how can parents then maintain that strong bond with their children? So I mean, we spoke a little bit about that shift of thinking or expectation. How would you, like, what are some strategies, or how can parents do that in today's day and age?
Well, I think that you have to find time to talk honestly and make meaning of shared experiences together. I think encouraging honest talk, even in instances where fear may creep in, where as a parent you might, or even as a child, may fear judgment of wrongdoing. I think having honest conversations routinely and knowing that it's okay to make mistakes, to do wrong, that we learn our most from the mistakes we make. And I think being all in caregiving tasks, when children are really young, you can't spend time having honest conversations and getting into conversations about fears that kids have or fears that parents have, and sharing those commonalities. But certainly when kids are very young, when you're doing caregiving tasks, changing diapers, feeding, whatnot, be all in. Put your phone down, turn the TV off, stop reading, or whatever. Parents in many respects have thousands of things to do, and hopefully those thousands of things are shared between both parents. But obviously they're single family home or parent homes as well. But really be all in. You've heard, I'm sure other people have heard, like I have, that be present, and that can't be overstated when engaging and looking to begin building strong relationships with your kids. Be present.
So how much weight would you put on being present? Because the thing is that we know research has shown us the importance of, right, connection and forming that, and being all in and being present in the moment. How important do you think that is?
I think it's really important. I think that if you're not present, then you can't develop, or you can't engage in conversations that ultimately develop that relationship that a child feels is safe, that where a child then knows it's okay to express their hopes, their dreams, their fears, their anxieties. And so, I think if there's a prerequisite to engagement and conversations, engagement and caregiving and whatnot, it's being present.
Yeah, amazing. And that's a really practical strategy that people can actually put in place, especially with the age group that we're dealing with. We're dealing with mostly children between 0 and 3 years, and then up to 6 years old. So these are the years that really count, because they are setting the foundation for the future. These interactions that you say and being present with your children, that forms the foundation for who and what that relationship's going to look like later on. So it's like, in those moments where you've got the option to put your phone down or have that time where you're actually engaging and being present in those small tasks, I think that's such a great skill, that it's something that it might not come habitually, naturally to most people. Like, it might be something that you have to be conscious about doing, and I think that's the era that we live in now. Is everything's so busy, everything's fast, everything's distraction, and we're multitasking and trying to do 50 things at once, but we don't realize that the impact that that's going to have on our relationship with children, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that leads me on to our next question. So, what are some of the things? So, we talk about building connection with children, how important that is. And one thing I thought about, Eric, when you were talking, was sometimes children this young can't talk about their fears, right? They can't talk about how they're feeling about certain things. However, they can express their emotions. We know how much young children, babies, toddlers can express their frustration, they're upset, they're angry, all of that kind of stuff. So, like, to me, when I hear you saying about being present, it's also being present in allowing them to feel those feelings, right? Like, that's something that I talk about a lot, and how important it is to really acknowledge children's feelings regardless of what they are, because that sets the foundation, for these later conversations and how to cope with that. So I guess, how would you then think about some of the challenges in teaching children empathy? Because I know that you have a strong background in empathy. I would love your commentary on, I guess, feelings, emotions, that young period of time, and how we can really kind of help support children.
Yeah, you said the word acknowledge, and that's extremely important. I think you have to acknowledge. I think you have to acknowledge the feelings that children are expressing, no matter what they are. Obviously, if the feelings they're expressing are potentially causing harm to themselves or to another child, then that's not okay. And there's no talking around it. It's simply, that's not okay. But a child that's crying loudly or upset or wants to go and be by themselves within eyesight, that's obviously fine. I think that goes back a little bit to what I said earlier with regards to anxiety and or vulnerability on the part of the adult. When I think about those types of things, if a child is scared about going into a situation. One of my children loved going to birthday parties, but if she walked into the birthday party and someone acknowledged her, forget it. She just wanted to enter, not be noticed, and kind of seamlessly blend in. And so to simply say to her, "Oh, stop thinking that way," or "Stop feeling that way," that's ridiculous. That makes her feelings
Invalid.
illegitimate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not okay. And so then, in terms of relationship building, if you tell a child that their feelings don't matter, then the next time they're feeling those things, you're certainly not the person they're going to go to
Yeah.
express their concerns. So I think, when I hear you ask your questions, I think a lot about our playground. There's often a lot of conversations, a lot of emotions that occur on the playground. And kids can be upset, or kids need redirection, and in being redirected or in being upset, they might just need a little time. And so acknowledging that you're going to give them some time because you notice they're upset is absolutely okay. And you may say, "Hey, I notice you're really upset. Why don't you sit here and take a few minutes, and when I see that you're done crying, I'll come back and talk to you." Or, "I see that you're really upset. Take a few minutes, and when you're ready to talk to me, come see me." You're acknowledging that the way that they're feeling, you're interested in knowing and learning more. And only as you learn more can you then offer them assistance and guidance in solving their problem. If we always solve the challenges and the problems our kids face, we're doing them a terrible disservice. And ultimately, there may be no deep conversation. There may be no meaning making among the two, because the child may ultimately just resort to the fact that, well, if I talk to mom, then it's going to be solved, and then I don't have to do anything else about it. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And it absolutely hits on the point that when you solve the problems for children, you're not giving them the opportunity to actually problem solve and develop those skills that we want them to have. So it's better to support your child, to help them to problem solve, to understand what it is that they can do, so that they are developing that skill. And when you were talking about your daughter going into the birthday party, it would be great for parents that are listening out there. What was your strategy? What did you do or say to her? Or did you just not say anything? Like, if somebody did acknowledge her, for example, and she got really upset over that, how did you then, I guess, support her in that moment?
Well, I mean, it's been a really long time. So that daughter happens to be 22 years old now.
And happily going into parties, I'm sure.
No, you know what? She's not one for parties. So anyway, that's another show as well. But we acknowledge those feelings, and it wasn't one of those where we opened the door to the party, shoved her in, and then went away. It was maybe we stay by her, maybe we walk in, maybe we begin doing the activity alongside her and slowly step away. But it's the goal ultimately is to make the child feel safe. She ultimately wasn't a very anxious child throughout much of her childhood. But never once did we say you're being ridiculous. And while I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, oh, it was always lovely and nice, and yes, I can see that you're very anxious right now and whatnot, but we have a great relationship to this day, and I think primarily it's because we created a safe space for her. We didn't necessarily solve her problems.
That's what it comes down to, right, Eric? Like, the thing is that you allowed a safe space to occur, or the fact that children's relationships are based on the fact if they feel safe and secure in their environment, and that environment includes all their caregivers and parents and teachers around them. So we see a lot of these, this anxiety or fear or whatever be cultivated because they don't have that sense of security or safety in the space. So I think that's a really important fact when we're talking about building that connection, with young children, is really giving that sense of security and safe to feel those emotions and feel what they are. If anyone listening out there does have a question, please feel free to submit them as we continue the conversation. If you are watching the replay, #replay, let us know where you're listening in from. We have people from Australia, from USA, New York, Manila, all around the world. And we're really deep into this discussion about the importance of building connection right from birth. So if we talk about what that connection looks like from infancy. I know it was such a long time ago for you, but for new parents that are listening out there, what are some of the strategies or what things? I know you mentioned about being present is really important, when they're doing those caregiving tasks. Is there anything else that you would kind of think about or let parents know what would be at the forefront of their mind when we're in that infancy stage?
Yeah. Well, what I was going to add was, in terms of, even kind of your recapping of my last statement with regards to ensuring that a child feels safe. Oftentimes, what we want to do is we want to encourage children to develop their own understanding of themselves and their own ability to problem solve. And so in doing that within a Montessori classroom, for sure, we ask a lot of questions, even in moments where conflict arises. And if a child doesn't feel safe, if a child doesn't feel calm and secure, then they can't think. And so, that's really important. That's really important. When we talk about infancy, I mean, obviously, close contact and things of that nature are really important. And because, early on, humans need that contact. They can't care for themselves. And so ensuring that, that time is spent as much as possible is extremely important. And as the kids grow and their language grows, I would go back to the beginning. Talk to them like they're people. Encourage them to do things that maybe they're not going to do it as well as you'd like. In a classroom, a child may spill some milk, and the expectation would be that they have responsibility for caring for their environment. The same is true at home for, we have 18-month-old children here, and they may spill their milk. They might grab the mop. They might push the milk around. Maybe it's not totally cleaned up, but they are taking ownership, and we are providing them with an ability to exert that ownership. We might have to come behind them and do a little bit more, but how great that the child wanted to do that and was provided an opportunity and the tools to go about doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw we had a toddler that started in our parent toddler program, and at the beginning he's a bit verbal, not so much, but was quite frustrated at specific things or some of the rules in the classroom and all that. And it was really amazing when you see this from the beginning of the term, which was only like 6-7 weeks ago. So you're talking about 2 hours a week being in that environment. How now when the water gets spilt, the jug, isn't thrown at somebody, it's the towel's picked up and they're, off they are, mopping up some water that was spilled. And you just see the shift in their behavior and the shift in their being, just the way they are because of the environment and the support that they receive and the adults in that space. So I think it's such a beautiful thing to see that ownership and that responsibility, and they just do it intrinsically. Like it's something that comes from within them. It's not something that is forced upon them, to do. So yeah, that triggered that little memory come up for me. Let's talk about when children have some challenging moments, because we know in parenting, there are all different types of parenting styles, and, the Montessori has its own parenting style as well, which, is quite similar to gentle parenting, respectful parenting, all that with boundaries. But I guess when children are having those big emotions and when discipline comes into the picture, some people might think, well, that's not a great time, or how do you even build a connection with a child in that moment? Is that even possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think you again have to acknowledge how they're feeling, and you may choose to give them the benefit of the doubt and express that in your language. So someone takes the paintbrush from someone else, and maybe the statement to them is, "I see that you took the paintbrush from Johnny because I get the sense that you wanted to paint also. Is that right?" "Yes, it is." "Oh, well, right now he's painting and it's a one-person work. So you'll have to wait." I think, one, you're being respectful of the child, but two, you're also offering some redirection. But first and foremost, you're acknowledging what you saw. It's objective. It's not, you're not being subjective. And I think if you can maintain some objectivity, that's really good. And if the child is really upset, if you're really upset because you've redirected 10 times, the best thing to do is for everybody to take a moment. And I don't think there's anything that feels better to me than when a child is really upset, and perhaps I find my own temperature rising, for lack of a better word. And I just maintain that calm, because being upset and raising a voice isn't going to solve anything. And it's not going to show that you care. The ultimate goal, of course, is to offer redirection so that the next time the child approaches things differently. You made mention earlier about freedom within limits. I have a really good friend that kind of turned that phrase and identified that with limits comes freedom. And I think that is very, very true. And certainly that, something that we want to support children in learning with regards to what are the limits of their own behavior, so that ultimately conflicts diminish and children then have the freedom to move and can solve those, instances when they arise. So I think ultimately being honest, being consistent, and having empathy for them when you offer redirection and set limits is really probably one of the best things that you can do.
I love that. I think the fact that you said like having empathy towards them is the most important thing, because we can get really carried away in that moment with our own feelings and our own emotions, and like, all this frustration, for the fifth time you've told them to do something and it's not being done, and all those expectations that you might have. We don't realize that it's not about us in that situation. It's about the child, and having empathy towards what they're going through, because they can't meet us where we're at, right? We always have to bring ourselves down and meet the child where they're at. So it's really important to remember that. And I just love, just to remember in those moments to have empathy for that child, because they're just learning and they just need our support, and just being there for them and being present and trying to have that calm is the best thing that we can do for them. So yeah. Definitely. I love that.
Yeah. I think, I personally, I think you nailed it right there. It's never about us. It's about the child. It doesn't matter how old the child is. It's, and that it speaks to that anxiety that we might have as parents, or that lack of willingness for vulnerability, that makes it all about us. And it's not about us. It's about them. And there's no reason that we should ever think that they know as much as we do. And I think it's our responsibility and it's our job to ensure that we allow them to learn, and we allow them to learn through the conversations we have. And of course, when we don't solve their problems and we instead talk about them, when we share our own vulnerabilities for similar situations and experiences we've had, and, oh yeah, that happened to me. This is what I did, or this is what you might choose to do, or whatnot. But yeah, it's never about us. It's about them. And I think when we put them first and we take time to put them first, that's when connections grow stronger and relationships are more healthy.
I love it. Eric, we have a question from Arlene. Arlene was asking, how about if your child prefers dad versus me, specifically at toddler age? How can I, as a mum, continue to persevere for a close connection?
Well, that's interesting. In some of my closing remarks, I would say that, we've always encouraged our kids to talk to both of us. And of course, these days they prefer mom over me, and that's fine. I have two girls. I have a son as well, but all of them prefer her, and I think it's okay. I don't think that I think you perseverance is about I'll say in some respects, getting knocked down and getting back up, and electing to not be defeated and to continue trying and try again. And so, I think that you don't give up. You continue efforts to redirect. Obviously, in instances when you have a toddler, I would say, you and dad have to be on the same page. And, in instances where there's redirection, I think as your child grows older, certainly in households, there's always this, well, I'm going to go ask dad because he's going to tell me what I want to know versus going to mom. And I think, that's where that relationship that you share with dad becomes really important. And the conversations that I've been encouraging between parents and children have to exist between caregivers and parents to ensure that there's consistency. It's not enough to engage wholeheartedly in meaning making conversations in one instance about one topic. And when the topic comes back again, simply say, well, remember we talked about that. We're not going to talk about that again. I mean, obviously, there are some instances, but it's about, you just have to be consistent, I think.
Yeah, I would like to add to that actually. So the best way I feel with toddlers is really to kind of engage with them in their play. So, during the play, to build that close connection with them, enter into their play. So if you do see your child, playing with something, be genuinely interested and, and use that opportunity to really build that connection with your child, because children really do form relationships through play. The other thing I would say is, if your child prefers dad, then you can always acknowledge that as well. And I would also talk to your partner about that and say, oh, can you involve me? So if your child decided to go to read a book, say with your partner, and then you felt left out, oh, I would really love to come and read that book with you. And then I would encourage the dad to invite you along. Oh, mom's going to join us this time. And, and kind of use that opportunity to build that connection as well. Like, that's just a few things that came to mind in that situation. But yeah, I hope that's answered your question, Arlene. Thanks for that. Eric, any last remarks when we talk about, building connection? We've had such a beautiful discussion about the importance of building relationships and connections with children and what that looks like and the obstacles and how important it is. Is there anything else that you wanted to tell our audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think to close, I would just encourage everyone that as their children grow, to encourage them to talk about all of life's subjects. As I kind of alluded earlier, I have 3 children, 22, 20, and 18. And we've always encouraged them to talk about anything. And along with that, I've always said that, when you talk to us, we will give you advice. Whether or not you choose to take that advice is up to you. But the only choice is that you have to talk. And so, we have some pretty wonderful kids. I would anticipate that, obviously most listeners that have children would say, oh yeah, my kid's great. Good deal. Good for you. But I think, be honest, have good conversations, be willing to express your anxiety when you have it, be willing to be vulnerable and share those instances where you've had common experiences. And ultimately just have conversations. I think that makes for kids that like their parents. Our kids like their parents. In some cases, my wife and I might look at each other and think they like us a little too much. But I'll tell you, overall, I'd much rather have it that way than the other. So anyway, but yeah, I appreciate being here. If people have questions or whatnot, I'm certainly happy to answer those and give my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today. Oh, we do have one last question that's come through from somebody on Facebook. So any tips on building a connection when parent and child build it differently? Like if reading a book or watching a movie builds connection for one but not the other, right?
Well, I'm assuming, I guess in this, I know you've used an example. One person likes a movie and they would like to do that, whereas someone else likes to read a book. I think I would probably keep trying other instances. One thing that comes to mind, if there's an opportunity to be together, it might be, hey, in this instance, why don't you pick what we're going to do? And in another instance, the next time I'll pick what we're going to do. And you can talk about, what the expectations are for either activity. You can talk about the experience you shared post activity, and what you wished was great, or what you wish was different, and what you found to be great. And ultimately from there, perhaps a new relationship can be formed, and other things that other activities that help build a different connection can be found. That's what I might suggest.
Great. I love the debrief. Yep, debriefing after the after the activity and really talking about it. That's a great advice. Thanks for that question. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today. And if anyone else does have any other questions or comments, please feel free, pop them into the comments, and we can always answer them at a later time. If you want to catch the replay, it's on our YouTube channel. Eric, if people are looking to connect with you or any of your services or books that you might have, I know that you've authored. Is there anything or anywhere that you'd like to send people, or a link that we can pop into the comments for everyone to find?
Sure. Well, they can connect with me at ericdustmanbooks.com or ericdustmanbooks@gmail.com. So website or email address.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. And for everyone else that joined us today, thank you so much for taking time out of your day or night to be here with us at the Guide and Grow community. It's been a pleasure as always. I can't wait to do the next live event with you. Have a safe and blessed holiday. And until next time, take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.